Good morning, everyone. I'm Mike VanWambeke, teacher at Robinson Secondary School in Fairfax, Virginia. The lesson that I'm looking to tell you all about today has to do with the election of 1800, and the lesson that I designed was meant to be used in a 10th grade government classroom, but it could easily be used in a 11th grade history classroom or U.S. history classroom as well. And so one of the things that kind of piqued my interest about this and sort of why I wanted to study it more here is that it's an election that doesn't get as much scholarly consideration, and it is one that is very contentious. And I felt, especially for my government students, if they could see something contentious from 216 years ago, it would be a good way to frame our discussion as we look at the election of 2016. This would be sequenced in my unit probably right after a discussion of political ideology, generally speaking, and then the different types of political parties that exist in the U.S. today, although it might also come before that as just a way of kind of talking about how parties got started in the United States. In the Google Drive folder that's available to all of you, there are a few things. There's the lesson plan. There is a sort of a master Google Slides that has all of the excerpts from the primary source documents, as well as links to everything, as well as this picture too, if you'd like it for your own purposes. It has also a document or a graphic organizer and document study materials in a Google Doc, and then also a rubric and answer key. One of the things that I try to do in this lesson, which is going to arc over one 90-minute period for my class, but it could then also be split across two classes if you don't have the block. I want to start my students off by kind of figuring out what they know. And so my warm-up questions are all centered around adjectives or phrases that they would use to describe elections in America today. And if they've been paying any attention over the summer, they should have a few things to share. And that would be either something they'd write down or else discuss with neighbors and then share back to the class. What I have after that are some primary source documents, and I'll talk a little bit about where the sources I pulled from for this lesson are in just a minute, but kind of a guided look at a couple of primary source documents. Since the students will be on their own later in class, I really want to make sure that we look at a couple together as a class and give them a chance to sort of explore them, and also get a sense of what some of the founding fathers were saying about the election of 1800 after the fact. And so they're going to look at a letter by Jefferson and then a response by Adams. And so I'll have the students answer some questions there. The active learning portion, the students will have a graphic organizer where they're going to be doing a reading on the election of 1800, and I've selected two sources that, depending on the reading level of your class, you could use different ones, or else you could jigsaw it as well if you wanted to sort of get through it a little more quickly. One of them is an essay from the Thomas Jefferson Monticello Institute. The other one is actually the newsletter that we saw earlier this week that I think is written at a little more accessible level. So if you don't want to do the scholarly essay, the newspaper could also be used to give a lot of the same information. The other big part of the activity is an active learning on a document study. One of the things that we try to do at our school, other teachers here have mentioned the document-based questions, the DBQs. The DBQs that I'm doing with my students will look familiar to you, but the rubric or the way the questions are phrased or graded is different because one of the things that we try to do in the 10th grade class is prepare students to take international baccalaureate courses in 11th and 12th grade. And so, using British terms like mark in there instead of, just asking why or give me 3 reasons is sort of why it's phrased a little differently. And of course, the last thing for the activity is a reflection, taking a stand, and so I like to put little cards up around the room of the extent to which students agree with different statements, and then of course that allows us to tie back to the beginning of the lesson using the materials that they've learned. In terms of the resources that I pulled from, you can see the political cartoons I've chosen here, just a quick screenshot of them, but they are larger with some other details. I pulled from 3 sources, majorly speaking, and so the Google Cultural Institute, we saw this when we were at the research library earlier the week. The election of 1800, really nice set of sources that goes from unification all the way up through the election's aftermath and the Electoral College. I have 3 documents from Founders Archive in the National Archives. So we would be looking at the first 2 in the guided classwork, and then the 3rd one, the letter from Alexander Hamilton about John Adams's character. That one would be something that students would be doing as part of the document study. And then, of course, for the reading, these are the 2 options that came from the Thomas Jefferson Foundation that you would be able to use for that. In terms of my overall goals for the lesson, and I don't know if I'll be able to play my little video here. It was a nice little, yeah, it doesn't look like it's there. It's okay. It was a fun little 2-minute thing, and I was going to just, oh, there it goes. You can see already very colorful explanations of how the Founding Fathers saw one another. And one of the things that I just thought was really powerful about it, and I'll just keep talking. You can kind of pay attention if they come up or not. But it was just something to show that, you know, those images of unity, like, you know, the 1776 signing of the Declaration, you know, it just helps students see that there is a lot more faction and discord and differing views on what you know, America's future would be. And so I really want them to understand those things, and I really think that, you know, both between this video and then also some of the other things that they'll be reading and looking at, that they can see that there are real issues that are dividing the nation at that time. And obviously my goals for the lesson is to increase their comfort and familiarity, especially with primary source documents, especially with documents with difficult vocabulary and language. And then, of course, really this last part here about discussion, writing, and reflection, you know, always wanting to come back to those ideas in the classroom. And so this nice little 2-minute video is also on the election of 1800, that Google Cultural Institute, and then also embedded in the Google slide that I've created on the other one. In terms of the sort of end part of class, you know, when they take a stand, the continuum questions, the 4 questions that I'm going to be asking them about have to do with, you know, their thoughts of how Jefferson remembers the election of 1800 versus what they've studied about it. I want them to think towards today in terms of the criticism of the candidates. I want them to think about the spirit of compromise versus conflict, because one of the things that this lesson naturally flows into, if you're teaching U.S. history, it flows into Jefferson's America. If you're teaching U.S. government, it flows right into the Electoral College, which would be the next part of my sequence, since this does go to the Electoral College. And then, of course, this one is also something that I think would be useful for an extension. There's a lot of scholarship on how revolutionary this election of 1800 was. I've included in my lesson plans a book that really has a lot of different perspective essays. And so if you're looking to do something more with your students on this, that would be a really good direction to go. One last thing I'll say, in my attempt with this lesson, I've tried to make it both digital and in classroom. And so our county has really been making this push to move towards one-to-one computing initiatives. And so this is a lesson that could be both you know, teacher directed with printouts, or if you wanted to have it student directed, they would be able to even use their electronic device and scroll through the different documents and access them directly that way. So I think that's everything, so thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.